Yeah. So good morning again. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a particular slice of the precepts, and then we'll have a conversation together. The particular slice I'm going to talk about is the second of the three pure precepts. I vow to make every effort to wake up to my true nature, to see clearly, and to live in accordance with what is true. It is the teaching of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi and the path of one who practices and that which is practiced. What on earth does that mean? Sounds pretty ambitious. So first, the three pure precepts, making every effort to embody non-violence, to wake up to our true nature, and to live for the benefit of others. These originally come out of the Dhamma, which is one of the really classic old teachings in the Theravadan tradition, where there's a phrase along the lines of doing no evil, doing good, and purifying the mind. This is what is done by the awakened ones. That's roughly what it says. Dogen, who was the founder of Soto Zen, used a Chinese poem, one of those nice little blocks of 4x4 Chinese poems that was from this as one of his fascicles. So he wrote extensively about this. And that's where those rather poetic lines, it is the teaching of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi and the path of one who practices, etc., come from. And these three are kind of the framework, the ones which we read, we chanted, aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption, by not speaking, by not listening deeply, and unskillful speech, undertakers of training precept. Those are the five of those which are kind of how we live these in the world. These three are kind of the framework within which those operate. Framework is I don't want to do bad things. I don't want to hurt self or others. I want to live in a way that benefits other people. And I want to be able to see clearly, because I know everybody, or most people, in their own way, everybody, I think is fair, are trying to do the right thing. It's just for most of us, most of the time, we are not seeing clearly, so we're just not doing it right. We're trying, but because we can't really see clearly, we cause harm. And then after the fact, a lot of the time, we realize it. Sometimes we don't even realize it. So the one in the middle here is the one I'm going to talk about, is the one that gets that delusion out of the way and helps us to see clearly. This is I vow to make every effort, that when I try and do good, it really is well informed and it really is well thought out and it really is helpful. I vow to make every effort such that when I act, I really don't cause harm and I really do good. So passing through this, to wake up to my true nature. What is my true nature? Well, it is not this. In a sense, it is this, but it's not what I think it is. It's just not what I think it is. The my is the problem. What is my true nature? My true nature is I don't actually exist. I am totally impermanent. If you had told me when I was a 16-year-old boy that I would end up, and that's like almost before going to university, kind of moving through into the grown-up stages of life. If you told me when I was 16 years old that I would have ended up in the US working as a deal guy at Bell South, I just would not have believed you. I mean, the country and the chosen profession, neither of those were things that would have computed when I was that age. And if you told me 20 years ago, when I was in the middle of my corporate career, that I'd end up as a Dharma teacher in Atlanta, I just simply wouldn't have believed you. And it's not that, it was just, it's totally inconceivable from that place. Totally inconceivable. So who is this me? Those are 20-year arcs. I'm changing every moment. I think biologically, every atom that is in this body has been in this body for less than 7 years. Every day I eat food, and that food literally becomes me. Every day I consume conversations, media, environment, events, and they become me. I become them. This me is not what I think it is. So what is my true nature? The teachings in the Theravadan canon include, there's one Buddha talked to one guy by the name of Bahia. There's a lovely story about Bahia, but I'll just go through the phrases that he used, and Bahia really pressed me. So, okay. So when there is seeing, there is just seeing. When there is hearing, there is just hearing. When there is sensing, there is just sensing. When there is cognition, any kind of mental activity, there is just cognition. If that's what's going on, there is no you in this anywhere. You are not here, you are not there, you are nowhere in the middle. You're not in the middle, you're nowhere in this. It's not denying seeing, it's not denying hearing. It's just saying it's not me seeing, it's not me hearing. There is just seeing, just hearing. You're not here, you're not there, you're nowhere in between. This, just this, is the release of suffering. That's that teaching. There are two strands that come down, two broad strands that come down to us through the Eastern Asian, the Mahayana traditions. The Madhyamaka tradition is the one based on emptiness, and it's the Wisdom Sutra, is the one that we just chanted, the Heart Sutra. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not an emptiness. And that's your true nature is empty. Empty. Form is emptiness. I was going to pick up the bell, but it's over there. So the bell, those bells that people are holding up. No, it's okay. Thank you. The bell is empty. What does that mean? It means it's empty of inherent bellness. So I'll pick up stick. Stick is empty of inherent stickness. If it was really cold here and none of us had any money and there was no other wood around, we'd burn it. It would be firewood. It wouldn't be, it'd be firewood. If I really needed to bang a nail in, it'd be a hammer. It's nature, it's empty of inherent nature, and it's constantly changing. But the emptiness is empty of inherent, of essence, of any inherent nature. And we are the same. That emptiness is not something to be held on to either. That emptiness is also empty. There's no such thing as emptiness. Emptiness is form, is the rest of it. So we can't hold on to this lack of stuff because we're here. That lack of stuff is precisely that out of which we all come into being. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. The other arc of the Mahayana tradition is the Chittamatra tradition, the mind only. And these are all different ways of looking at the same thing. We're going to move on from this in a minute, but it's like the heady piece up front. They're all different ways of looking at the same thing. Chittamatra, mind only. This is just mind, which means the only reason any of us see anything here is because there's this thing called mind, cognition, consciousness, however we want to frame that is looking at this and is making something. Again, it's not denying there's something there, but the reason this comes to be a thing is because mind operates in it. Or mind operates, and therefore, mind operates, and therefore. Mind creates a separation between a seer and a seen, and mind then starts wrapping perceptions around the scene. It's all mind. So everything, our world, each of us, for each of us, we make up our world. Now, a lot of this is collaborative because we're a social species, and there's this bigger mind that we're all under, right? But so this collaborative, and we can't just take this to be this nihilistic. There's nothing out there. It's just mind. But each of us puts our own spin, our own flavor on the world, and have our own unique world. If you think about it, things that The way you relate to stuff is unique to you. Everything about your life, your stuff, your house, your friends, your education, your worldviews, it's all yours and nobody else's. This is your world, and each of us has made up our worlds. It's not denying that they're worlds, but it's saying they're stories. So the true self is what is there before these stories. And it doesn't take the stories away, but it changes the way we relate to the stories. If we can come to see our true nature, that which is before the stories, then we're in a position to recognize that the stories, however beautiful and wonderful they are, aren't things we can hold on to. And from the perspective of this particular vow, those stories are things that get in the way of seeing clearly. To see clearly is to be able to see things so that they're not overly colored by my views, by my world. If it's overly colored by my world, then my acts are colored by this thing called ego, by the need. And they're going to not land with it. There's going to be a gap where suffering happens. Compassion can't be true compassion if I am in the middle of it. We've got to get the I out of the way for it to be true compassion. So the seeing clearly, I'm about to wake up to my true nature, to see clearly. Waking up to our true nature is what I've described, and to see clearly is living in the world with this illusion, this delusion of a self, this delusion of all of my stories being real, all of my stories actually being important, pushed aside. And to live in accordance with what is true. What is true, when you come to see it, it really is true, is that this sense of a self is fabricated, it's constructed, and it gets in the way of everything, and it causes all of our suffering. And that the joy that this self experiences is ephemeral, and unstable because it's ephemeral. And so ultimately can only lead to dukkha here and there. And this is a huge and really important and, which I'll come back to, that the peace and the pleasure we experience when we start letting that self go is so much sweeter, so much more beautiful than anything the self could possibly experience. That's something you have to actually experience to recognize this, but it is true. Once you start letting go of the self, that sense of peace is so wonderful. We touch on it when we're on the cushion. We touch on it sunbathing, when you're sunbathing and we get, nice warm sun coming down on you. Sometimes you can feel really physiologically really nice when it's calm and so forth. We touch on it. I've never done one of these, but I intend to do one of these sort of, what do you call it? You go into a tank of water and you kind of float, total sensory deprivation. There are ways we can move into places where we start to really let go, and we can start to move into feeling this peace. And as we settle into it, the more we can settle into this, the more we come to realize the truth of that peace is so much sweeter. It's not me experiencing it, it's just becoming that peace, letting go into that peace. So living in accordance with what is true is aligning ourselves with that and living, allowing that to completely inform our entire life. We go back up to the 5 remembrances. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. They are the ground upon which I stand. That's it. So we inform all of that with this non-self. We can't jump right into the non-self. As long as we're wandering around and we think we're people. We've just got to be skillful about letting go of pieces. But that's where we're headed here, living in accordance with what is true. It is the teaching of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, which is a Sanskrit phrase for supreme perfect enlightenment, which is this state It's not a state. This fundamentally means the same as Tathagata, for those of you who are familiar with that, or suchness. It's just the having let go of everything, the being completely released, being released from suffering, being released from any sense of identity, to where when there is the seen, there is just the seen. When there is hearing, there is just the heard. Completely released. So that's what Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is about. And the path of one who practices. So now we get to the rest of the precepts, the training precepts. The path of one who practices. In the Lotus Sutra traditions and the Pure Land traditions, as they came to be in Japan, and they're probably the two large. The Pure Land is the largest, and the Lotus Sutra is really large as well. So they're probably the two largest traditions in the world. I think Pure Land is the largest, but either way, they're really large. And both of those grow out of a medieval Japanese construct. This was around 1150 to 1200, which was the idea of original enlightenment. Kind of like original sin, only not. Original enlightenment. This deeply informs Zen, of course, and it comes out of the Tendai tradition, which is the Lotus Sutra tradition. Original enlightenment, and what that teaches is we are all original. We are all already enlightened. We just don't know it. And the tragedy of our lives is this illusion of an I want, I don't like, I like. I've always done it this way. My habits, this I keeps on popping up and getting in the way. So both of those traditions take as a given, we are already enlightened. So let's just live that way. Buddhas in the world do good. Buddhas in the world do no harm. And so let's just live that way. It's kind of a fake it till you make it, if you like. And to have complete confidence, both of the Lotus Sutra and the sutras behind the Pure Land tradition, they both, in both of those, the Buddha is teaching teaching this original enlightenment, and is encouraging everybody, individual by individual, you are already a Buddha. Have confidence in that. Know that. Now you've got to do the work of realizing, and it's important work, but start by knowing the truth that you are a Buddha. You are a manifestation of this Buddha nature. Another thing I didn't say, I'll go back and read the so actually the Lotus and the Pure Land Sutras, they both land on chanting. They both land on a chant. Namo Amida Buddha and Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, which are respectively homage to Amida Buddha, the Pure Land Buddha, and homage to the Lotus Sutra itself as an incarnation of this truth. The Heart Sutra, we end up at the bottom here. Gate Parasamgate Bodhi Swaha. Same thing. And this is a way of just simply using this as a way to say, this encapsulates all of the teachings, which are simply gone to the other shore, already awakened. That's what that says. What Gate Paragate means, basically. Gone to the other shore. The boat's crossed over. So these all teach, have confidence you are a Buddha. And that is the problem. The biggest problem is our own belief system. So if we leap into this acceptance, this deep acceptance of this deep truth, that there's an illusion wandering around on top of my inherent Buddha nature, the world changes. We start to see things differently. And that itself is seeing through the illusion. You say, yes, I get that. I get that. And now the teaching is simply, I've lost my page. The teaching is simply make every effort to embody non-violence and non-harming as the framework, to continue to see clearly, and to live and be lived for the benefit of all beings. And then we get on to where the suffering caused by destruction of life, where the suffering caused by exploitation, stealing, and oppression, I undertake to take this not freely given, etc. We get on with just living these, and these become living in accordance with what is true. They are the path of one who practices and that which is practiced. This vow, I vow to make every effort to wake up to my true nature, to see clearly, and to live in accordance with what is true. Dogen paraphrases that in this very mystical way. It is the teaching of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. So making that vow is itself supreme perfect enlightenment. I am going to do everything I can to do this. That itself is this move into enlightenment. That itself is letting go of this illusion. And it is the path. Realization and the path are actually the same thing. Another thing that's really interesting is when that self-nature is the wrong word, but Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, the valence of that, if you will, is actually the valence of being in love. Feels like being in love. It's not the wanting to hold on to somebody and that brings it in and that person will suddenly make this love a real thing. But there's that feeling. It's not quite somatic. That's why it's so precious and why we get so clumsy around. We get so clumsy around sex because sex or sexual relationships, because that plays around with the same thing and it gets really complicated because we start clinging to things to move into that which is transcendent. But emptiness feels like being in love. That's why the path of compassion and the path of wisdom actually end up in the same place because they are the same thing. So the teaching of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is this teaching of complete letting go of this sense of self, which is also the teaching of completely stepping into being in love with existence, being in love with the world, with everyone and everything. For all of their flaws, for all of their clumsiness, for all of the horrible suffering that's gone on through however many kalpas of their existence that leads to potentially and sometimes very clumsy and very harmful behavior right now. We love it all. We want to end the suffering, but we love it all. It's being in love with it. The path and the awakening are the same thing, and the actions we undertake. And the actions moving into that, bringing that into life, celebrating it. So the precepts, actually, all you need. If we truly get that we are already Buddhas, and we've just got to believe that, trust that, and start to let go of ourselves, let go of what we think is ourselves, and move into this way of relating to the world. Then, as I forget his name, Bodhisattva, never disparaging in the Lotus Sutra, he's the character who used to run around, and he's an embodiment of the whole Lotus Sutra. But the Lotus Sutra is just this strangely recursive thing. I could talk about it for hours. It's utterly extraordinary. But there's one chapter in the Lotus Sutra which in this particular way encapsulates the whole Lotus Sutra. There's this one Bodhisattva who runs around, the Bodhisattva never disparaging. It says, you'll be a Buddha, and you'll be a Buddha, and you'll be a Buddha. And people say, and they throw stones and sticks at him. So he runs away and he yells from a big distance, you'll be a Buddha, and you'll be a Buddha, and you'll be a Buddha. Because you will be. He knows you will be. And if you just trust